Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Navigating the Intersection of Technology, Standards Development, and Regulatory Compliance in a Changing Administration. And with that, I would like to introduce our moderator for today's webinar, Dr. Marielle Weintraub, who is the Director of Scientific Strategy for OTC and GMP Testing with Eurofins. Go ahead, Marielle.
Hi, thanks, Jen, and thank you everyone for joining us. As Jen said, I am Dr. Marielle Weintraub, the Director of Scientific Strategy for GMP and OTC testing here in Madison, Wisconsin. I get the privilege of introducing our two expert speakers today. First, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Maria Monagas. She's the Principal Scientist, Dietary Supplements and Herbal Medicines at USP. She has a PhD in Food Science and Technology from the Autonomous University of Madrid in Spain, and a master's in Industrial Fermentation Technology from Heriot-Watt University in Scotland. During her 12-year career at USP, Dr. Monagas has been responsible for the development and review of USP monographs and general chapters related to botanical articles that would be admitted into USP and the Dietary Supplements Compendium publications. She serves as a scientific liaison between industry, stakeholders, and the USP expert committee members during the USP standard development process. Dr. Monagas has more than 20 years of experience in the analysis and characterization of botanical ingredients used in the production of dietary supplements, particularly in ingredients derived from plants rich in polyphenols. She has contributed to more than 70 scientific publications, including original articles, book chapters, and industrial patents. We're very excited to have her here today. Your second speaker will be David Spangler. He is the Senior Vice President of Legal Government Affairs and Policy at the Consumer Health Product Association, also known as CHIPA. David leads the association's team of 8 across legal government affairs and policy functions, and he has expertise in regulatory matters. David joined CHIPA in 1984 as a legislative analyst. He subsequently served in several roles for the association in the President's Office, Project Management, International Affairs, and after completing law school in 1995, the association's legal department. David was named a vice president in 1997, a senior vice president in 2006, and his responsibilities were expanded to his current role in 2019. David is a member of the District of Columbia Bar, as well as the American Society of Association Executives. He authored the chapter on OTC medicines in modern pharmaceutical industry of Primer, and has served on a range of committees and working groups for the Food and Drug Law Institute and the Global Self-Care Federation. Spangler earned his certificate in organizational management in 1991 from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's Institute for Organizational Management. So today we are first going to hear from Dr. Monagas with her presentation titled USP Portfolio of Standards for Dietary Supplements and Herbal Medicines, Advancing the Science of Dietary Supplements. After Dr. Monagas speaks and after David Spangler speaks, we will then open up to questions from our audience. So, Dr. Monagas?
Thanks so much, Marielle, for your nice introduction, and we're very happy to be here. Thanks so much for the invitation. In relation to my presentation today,
So Maria, I think you might have access. Okay, great.
Sorry about that. So the contents for my presentation today, first, I will briefly introduce the USP standard for dietary supplement and herbal medicine. Then I will pass to describe the complexity of setting standard for dietary supplements how USP sets priority for standard development, and some specific examples about how we advance the science for dietary supplements. It's taking time to. Taking time to advance. Sorry.
Try clicking on the. Okay, perfect.
So USB is a nonprofit, independent, and standard-setting organization that was founded more than 200 years ago. And our mission is to improve global health through public standards and related programs that help ensure the quality, safety, and benefits of medicine and foods, including dietary supplements, which are considered as subcategory foods in the United States. USP portfolio of standards and solutions for dietary supplement and herbal medicines comprise our monograph published in the USPNF and in the Dietary Supplement Compendia, which is a compendia exclusively devoted to the dietary supplement industry. And also we have some general chapters and physical reference standards just exclusively for dietary supplements. The DSC offers a lot of supporting information for the industry, including botanical description, images for HPLC, HPTLC, chemical structure, and last but not least, our mission evaluation, which are summary of safety assessment of all the ingredients admitted into the compendia. Taking the example of the turmeric family of monograph, here is an illustration of how this portfolio of standards and solutions look for dietary supplement, all the resources in USPNF, and all the resources in the dietary supplement compendia. To understand a USP approach for standard development for dietary supplement, it's also important to understand the US regulatory landscape. And maybe everybody's aware with the SHEA Act, founded in established in 1994, which first introduces the term dietary supplement as that product, other than tobacco, intended to supplement the diet that bears or contains one or more of the following dietary ingredients: either a vitamin, a mineral, herb, or other botanical amino acid, or any other substance intended to increase the total dietary intake. Or it could be a concentrate, a metabolite, a constituent, an extract, or a combination of any of the ingredients described above. This opens a lot the door for innovation for the dietary supplement industry, but also creates a lot of challenges in standard development. I will describe a continuation. Parallel to this, we have the 21 CFR Part 11 for good manufacturing practices that define the quality specification for dietary supplement for identity, purity, strength, composition, and limits of contaminants. Also, that at least one appropriate test or examination is needed to verify the identity of the ingredients, and also that the test that we use should be appropriate and scientific valid methods. USP Compendial Science, which is basing our general notices, general chapter and monograph, we're able to set specifications. They're able to set specifications, and these specifications are comprised of test procedures and acceptance criteria for all the quality attributes, from identity to limits of contaminants. From identity to limits of contaminants, and this is actually the core, right, of our GMPs for dietary supplements, right? So our resources will help manufacturers comply with those good manufacturing practices. Sorry, but I'm having trouble advancing. The complexity in setting standards for dietary supplement actually arises from this, big universe of ingredients as defined by the SHEA, right? We have the so-called non-botanical ingredients from protein, enzyme, carotenoids, amino acids, and carbohydrates. We also include probiotic in that category. And then the whole botanical world, which starts with flower, fruits, roots, and rhizome, but it also comprises algae, fungi, and lichens. In addition to that, we have this complexity arising from this black box that I defined. But besides that, the good manufacturing practice requirement, which require us to propose test procedures and acceptance criteria from identity to limits of contaminants for each ingredient, but also their different permutations and combinations, right? So how will USP accomplish its mission for dietary supplements? So we have divided this universe into big expert committees, the non-botanical dietary supplement expert committee and the botanical dietary supplement and herbal medicines expert committee. At the same time, we have expert panels. We provide recommendations to our expert committee in very specific topic. We have an admission evaluation expert committee that takes care of the safety assessment for adverse event, possible adverse event reports for all the ingredients that are admitted into the compendia. It's a big task. And in addition to that, we have subcommittees for nomenclature, reference standard, modern analytical methods, microbiology issue, and adulteration and contamination, which is our newest, more recent subcommittee and identified as a priority area for our next cycle starting in July 2025. Altogether, these expert committees, right, will create all the monograph, the general chapters, right, and admission evaluation, plus additional publications in peer-reviewed journal. So this expert committee will work through an independent, transparent, and scientific standard setting process for both documentary standards and reference standards. The monograph will go through what we call a public review and comment period, where we will address comments received from the industry before balloting and before the standard becomes official. In the case of physical reference standard, we fully characterize those materials before they are approved. The contribution of this expert committee has resulted in 600 dietary supplement monographs, 12 dietary journal chapters, and 444 dietary supplement reference standards for botanical, vitamins, amino acids, minerals, and others. And stakeholders from academia, industry, and regulator are welcome to participate in standard development. This is a free of charge process in which we gather technical documentation about the manufacturing process of the ingredients and the dosage form. We propose a draft, we present it to the expert committee, and this draft will be published in what we call the pharmacopeia forum before approval by our expert committee. But in any time of this standard development process, and even when the standard is official, stakeholders are welcome to propose requests for revisions, for methodologies, for limits, etc. And I will talk a little bit more about this. To set priority for standard development in our work for monograph, journal chapters, and reference standards, we try to divide our work into big categories: continuous updates and new development. Continuous updates includes the revision of our legacy official monograph and journal chapters. For example, we may receive a request to propose to add ingredients derived from new manufacturing technologies into the same standard of a different standard. I bring here a very recent proposal, which is purification of botanical dry extract by two different technologies: absorption chromatography versus ultramembrane filtration technology that does not use solvents. Another challenge that we face a lot through the years is in the concentration and fractionation steps for omega-3 acids and ethyl ester from fish oil, in which different technologies can be used, including supercritical fluid extraction, enhanced silver technology, simulated moving bag technology, resulting in quite a variety of ingredients and specification, from ethyl ester concentrates to glyceride concentrates to what we call food grade oil. So we have to make proposals to include all these type of ingredients and also all the different specs into a monograph. This could be very challenging. Other proposals could be for adding new articles derived from the same plant source, but standardized to different phytochemicals, or maybe changing your specs or limits for idea and composition tests is a normal request. A continuous update also involves modernization of analytical methods, right? In this case, we need to replace outdated methodology. For example, HPLC into UPLC is very common, but we also need the support from manufacturers, data from manufacturers to be able to advance in some of these modernizations. USP is also working with our modern analytical methods subcommittee in proposing flexible approaches to insert modern analytical method. And for example, we have been introducing NMR and quantitative NMR in some of our monograph, and we'll talk about those examples later. Other proposals could be green chemistry, just to replace toxic solvents. For our new developments, our prioritization analysis is a bit different, and we'll ask different questions. For example, what is the public health risks associated with developing this ingredient? Are we solving some adulteration, contamination risks? We also look at the number of products in the market, number of manufacturing impacted. Are we solving any regulatory relief? Sometimes USP, had the responsibility of maybe developing the first global standard for certain ingredients. Scientific feasibility is another area we have to look carefully. Also, new development for general chapter. It could be either informational general chapter or procedural general chapter that take more work because we need to select a methodology and also go through robust method development and validation. And finally, reference standards. We need to decide in what qualitative standards and quantitative standards we're going to be proposing in our monograph to find application in identity tests, system suitability tests, composition, and limit tests. So anytime, we welcome your request for revision for new monograph proposals. It's very easy. It starts with the submission of the technical documentation that you see in the screen, a specification sheet, certificate of analysis, flow charts, but also analytical method and validation reports, right? We work on those proposals. You can submit it to this email posted here. Even though if you don't have complete validation data, please do not hesitate in submitting your data because we always find ways of working, internally and with our expert committee to complete some of the validation work. So USP cannot do this alone, right? All this mission and others in the complexity of the dietary supplements alone. We welcome and have several stakeholder engagement models for stakeholders to participate in standard development. Be very early by submitting your documentation, could be during the open period for public comments, right? Where you say like this, I have a better method or my limits are not fitted in. It could be post-publication when you're trying to implement the testing. It could be even when the compendial is approved, in that compendial stage when the standard is approved, and we can start another revision proposal after consideration of your data. And this is an example of early stakeholder involvement. Is our open forum events that we have been launching these events for a specific ingredient topic, as you can see here, elderberry, amino acid. But we also have launched some open forums just to talk about a specific test or technology. As you can see here, from impurity and contaminants to emerging technologies in probiotics. Now, in this section of my presentation, I would like to go through some specific examples about how we advance the science for dietary supplement from a specification to finished products, reference standard, safety assessment, and environmental life cycle. Regarding this last one, I would like to highlight that there's a recent publication from our expert committee about the conservation and protection status of our compendial species, something to look at very soon. Starting with the identification test, I would like to highlight this flexible ID approach that was proposed for the PQQ monographs. For identification test B, for example, may be met by following either procedure 1 based in IR or procedure 2 based in proton NMR. And by this, we give the flexibility to manufacturers to start evaluating novel technologies, right, at a pace. Because sometimes we have to make really implementation periods for inserting, new technology into our monographs. Another nice example of the incorporation of this modern analytical method is the quantitative NMR test proposed for the content of acemanones, which are very complex polysaccharides in the aloe vera monograph family. And these, to go with the test, we have developed the USP aloe vera reference standard. And as you can see, we also provide the NMR spectrum in the certificate of analysis of this reference standard. Considering contaminants, I would like to highlight our recent General Chapter 1565 for PAs as contaminants. And this has been an effort. It's an informational chapter only that contains everything about the dietary exposure to PAs, the toxicology at acute, subchronic, chronic levels, regulatory and proposed tolerable, the daily intake, and many other valuable information for the industry. Labeling is another important section of our monograph. It's as important as ID or composition. And in this case, our botanical expert committee was concerned about some misunderstanding in the use of plant-to-extract ratio in botanical extracts. These plant-to-extract extract ratios are descriptors of botanical extract, normally include a certificate of analysis of these ingredients, but also they have a lot of implication in labeling. And there was a lot of misunderstanding about the use of these in labeling. And these Frontiers in Pharmacology publication focus actually also part of it in highlighting the recommendations for labeling for botanical extracts in chapter 565 and how these labeling recommendations should be actually translated into dietary supplement finished product labeling. I encourage you to look at this open access publication. Considering finished products, chapter 2800 for multi-ingredients is also very recent. And this chapter actually focuses on proposing, various quality tests, universal tests, specific tests, and product performance tests for those multi-ingredient finished dosage forms for which individual monographs are not available. So we encourage the use of our chapters and individual monograph to establish specifications for those finished product containing multi-ingredient. And as an example, I would like to illustrate these popular multi-ingredient formulation composed of elderberry, echinacea, vitamin C, and zinc syrup. And here I try to highlight the resources that USP has in terms of monograph and general chapters to help support each one of the specifications, including in this label, from vitamin C, zinc, the two echinacea species, and also the elderberry ingredient, for which we have like 5 different monographs now. Even for excipients, you can find, some very useful individual monographs to qualify your excipients. Finally, my last example will be about reference standards. And here I would like to highlight the new USP Cranberry Juice Dry Extra reference standard, which we call it a multi-profile reference standard, because we are able to provide in our certificate of analysis images at 3 different wavelengths. This is a fit-for-purpose reference standard, which is ideal for the identification tests included in the monograph, but also for what we call anti-adulteration provision. Some of our monographs for cranberry have an adulterant section, which is very novel. And we're trying to do this also for elderberry. And the new elderberry reference standard is already available with 2 different wavelengths too. And I would like to just finish my presentation by summarizing the benefits of the USP standards and programs for dietary supplement. Our monograph and reference standards are very useful to ensure quality and safety, global regulatory compliance, reduction of adulteration and associated adverse event reports, correct ingredient disclosure and labeling of finished products, and also they promote research and innovation. On the other hand, we have our USP verification program, which is a third-party verification that helps confirm in the tested product that the tested product contains the ingredient listed on the label in the declared strength and amount. They are free of contaminants, and the manufacturers meet good manufacturing practices according to FDA. Thanks so much for listening to my presentation. I'll be happy to answer more questions. Also, a final message is that our call for candidates for the 2025-2030 cycle are still open until March 30. So we welcome your applications to be an expert volunteer in any of these expert committees. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Managas. I know we will be looking for a lot of questions to be coming in from the audience, and we appreciate your time that you have given to us today. I would like to call our next speaker and regulatory expert, David Spangler, who will be talking to us about the new administration. He'll be giving us an update, and I really enjoy the title of his talk as What's Next in 2025. So David, I'll pass this over to you.
So this is a very government affairs oriented presentation rather than a technical presentation, as I'm going to give an overview of the new administration, a little bit about Congress, a little bit about the states, and just some things to watch for as we think about the FDA regulated community, in particular drugs and supplements, but a little more broadly as well. So next slide. I think folks have read and know who the key players are within the administration. So Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has been confirmed as HHS Secretary. Dr. McCary from Hopkins is not yet been confirmed, but we know he's making the rounds in the Senate. Probably a couple other folks within the HHS agencies will be confirmed first. Excuse me. But here are a number of the names that you will hear over the next period of time about our space. Next slide. A little bit about Kennedy. So I have a quote here that was when he was a private citizen. This is before the election, but I think it says kind of where he's coming from philosophically. FDA's war on public health is about to end, includes its aggressive suppression of psychedelics, peptides, stem cells, raw milk, hyperbaric therapies, chelating compounds, ivermectin, so on and so on and so on. If you work for the FDA and are part of this corrupt systems, I have two messages for you: preserve your records and pack your bags. Now, again, that was October. That was before the election. That was before he was named HHS Secretary, before he was confirmed. But, you know, as a private citizen, these were his views. In his more public-facing, once he was nominee, and in his first town hall at HHS, a number of themes stand out for us in this audience around his whole Make America Healthy movement. One, shifting the focus of healthcare research to the cause of illness and prevention. Second, strong focus on chronic conditions, particularly in children and autism. Third, this is a quote from the Make America Healthy Again presidential memorandum: fresh thinking on nutrition, physical activity, over-reliance on medication and treatments, effects of new technology habits, food, and drug quality and safety. Fourth one, especially important for this audience, adjusting federal health policies to give people more options, including that support disease prevention. So this is why in the dietary supplement community, some folks, decent number of folks, fairly optimistic. And then last, additives under scrutiny. Strong focus. I'm going to repeat that one later, but additives under scrutiny. Next slide. What do we know about Dr. McCary? Well, we know he's a Hopkins cancer surgeon. He's widely published both in academic circles as well as for general audiences on challenges in the healthcare system. Done contributions on Fox News. Greater prevention emphasis comes through in a lot of his writings. He is not totally unfamiliar with our space. He was a consultant to the Texas-based retailer HEB on their COVID-19 response. He has been divesting now, but was involved with Sesame, a telehealth company, connecting consumers to physicians who can prescribe compounded weight loss drugs. And he has been quoted as saying the supplement industry is poorly regulated. So you do have some push and pull between, yes, more prevention, but yes, also a desire that maybe there are gaps in how supplements are regulated. Next slide. In Congress, when you hear names in Congress, a lot of times you'll hear either about the speaker or the minority leader in the House, or the Senate majority or minority leaders in the Senate, but then also key committee leadership. So pretty much anything and everything that impacts the Food and Drug Administration, and more broadly, much of the Department of Health and Human Services. There's some finance as well, but almost everything runs through the Senate Health Committee. That stands for Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. Senator Bill Cassidy, a physician from Louisiana, is the chair of that, and Bernie Sanders is the ranking member. So you'll see those names a lot when it comes to FDA-related legislation. And similarly in the House, you'll hear the names Brett Guthrie, chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee, Buddy Carter, the Health Subcommittee of that committee, and then the ranking member, Frank Pallone. Next slide. So what are we looking at? We, as the Consumer Healthcare Products Association, advocating for OTC medicine companies, dietary supplement companies, consumer medical devices. What are we looking at? One, got to think about the big picture of what is President Trump's 2025 agenda. Tax cuts, very high on his agenda. There's a law expiring. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Deregulation themes, certainly strong in these early days and months of the Trump administration. DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, led by Elon Musk. Tariffs, and then immigration deportation. So we know these are all high on the Trump agenda. What about our agenda as an advocacy organization? One, we're the first user fee program coming up for reauthorization. The OTC Monograph User Fee Act expires in September of this year, so it needs to be reauthorized. We know as a private citizen, Secretary Kennedy expressed some hostility towards user fee programs. Will that continue now that he is secretary? Do not know. We'll hope to find out very, very soon, because we're the first to go through this reauthorization process in this administration. We do think there could be some reforms to the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act that make common sense, so we will continue to be pursuing those. We'll be continuing to pursue FSA and HSA expansion for dietary supplements and for oral care products. OTC medicines, by and large, are eligible for both, but because oral care is prevention, it is not. So we want to fix that. And then last, lots and lots of rumors and executive orders and Federal Register notices on tariffs and trade, and desire by the administration to see more onshoring. So very much on our agenda as well. Next. Budget reconciliation. I put this up here because you're hearing a lot about it last week and the week before and this week. Big House vote today on whether or not they can agree on an outline. Every year for the budget, Congress has to pass a Budget Reconciliation Act, because there will be gaps or holes between what individual appropriation bills have passed and the budget overall. So there's a Budget Reconciliation Act for every year's budget. Because last year's budget never passed, there were just a series of continuing resolutions, one of which runs out in about 3 weeks. Because of that, there will be 2 budget reconciliation bills that have to pass this year. This is why you read in the papers, do we want 2 bills or do we want 1 bill? When I say we, I'm talking about the Trump administration, the president himself, the House, the Senate. The House is of a view we might only get 1 big shot. So let's put everything into 1 great big bill. That's why you hear the House talking about 1 big bill. The Senate, in contrast, knowing there have to be 2 budget reconciliation acts this year, figures why not break up the things that are on the president's agenda into 2 bundles? Let's take care of the things that we need to take care of right away now, i.e. the tax extenders that are going to be expiring. and then maybe do some of these other things later. So that's the dynamic you're reading about in the paper between the one bill versus two bill. There will be two budget reconciliation bills this year, but the issue is, do we have all the add-ons? Do we put those in one big package earlier, the first bill, or do we split it up? And this is important because, again, narrow Republican margin in the House, just 3 seats. Next slide. Let's talk a little bit about priorities that we know that the Department of Health and Human Services and the Food and Drug Administration have, and some things to watch. For one thing, personnel is policy. So big question, still open question, that will not be answered until McCary gets there, assuming he's confirmed, is how deep Schedule F's not the technical term, they have a different word for it now, but in essence, it's non-competitive appointments, i.e. it can go to a political person and can be hired and fired at the president's discretion, don't have the civil service protections. How deep will that go into the agency? Rumors are that all the center directors will be under that non-competitive appointment authority. We don't know yet, though. Will it go deeper than that? Stay tuned. Few things impacting attrition. We'll talk more about some of them in a moment, but one right out of the chute, the return to office emphasis. To the extent somebody's thinking, I don't want to go back to FDA 5 days a week, I was liking 1 day a pay period or 2 days a pay period. Probably going to see some attrition because of that. Another thing, thinking about FDA and HHS, any new administration, not just the Trump administration, but the first Trump administration, Biden, Obama, both Bushes, everybody, when they come in, the first thing they do is put a freeze on things that were being done at the last minute by the previous administration. So anything that had a pending effective date, that was frozen for 2 months from January 20. So that comes up here in about 3 weeks. Not saying they won't just unfreeze and let things go forward, but that gives new people coming in the opportunity to look at things and say, you know what, that doesn't fly in this administration. And then they can pull it, they can repropose it, or they can just let it go through. Then the other thing that can happen is under the Congressional Review Act, if both houses of Senate pass resolutions, the House and the Senate pass a resolution and the president agrees, then there's a 6-month window through which rules can be rescinded. I don't think we have any that would meet that criteria, but in the last Trump administration, there were a number from the Department of Energy that got pulled. So it does happen. I will say within our universe, the OTC supplement and consumer medical device universe, one thing that is under that freeze is the final rule on additional conditions of non-prescription use. In other words, prescription RX to OTC switch with tech. That is under the freeze. Otherwise, it would have come into effect already. Instead, they pushed that into March. The other thing that I get questions about, what about the OMUFA 2, the OTC Monograph User Fee Act goals letter that industry and FDA negotiated and was published late last year? That was transmitted to Congress already. That was in the last days of the Biden administration. That was by plan. That's a congressionally mandated date. Actually, the 15th was the date, so they were a couple days early. Will they ask to relook at that? Do not know. Without an FDA commissioner, without a director of the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, it's possible they have a view. I would note in past transitions between parties, they did not open other user fee goals letters. They did not open CHPA's user fee goals letter, which was largely negotiated in the Obama administration, but then finalized in the Trump administration with only the most minor of changes. Another thing to keep your eyes on, food additives in focus. Food, colors in particular, but food additives more broadly. I'd say colors kind of wave one, but also food additives more broadly. And when you think about what might they do there, a lot of criticism of late in the press about the self-GRAS option. So those of you who are in the additive space or new dietary ingredient space, I would not be at all surprised to see the self-GRAS option be critically looked at. I also, again, would not be at all surprised to see more colors banned. You've already had California and some states talking about some colors. You're going to see more of that at the federal level, I would predict. Next slide. Executive orders. So President Trump has signed a record number, literally a record number of executive orders in his first month in office. There are, I don't know how many, we must be up north of 100 now, but there are several that I want to draw your attention to. One, there's a typo on that slide, my apologies. First, trade and tariff related. There have been a number of trade and tariff related executive orders. Most of them are setting either an early March or an early April deadline. The one to keep an eye on in particular, two to keep an eye on in particular, reciprocal tariffs on what the president has termed unfair trade, i.e. not just tariffs from another country, but things like the digital services tax or things where certain fees or orders create disparate impacts on U.S. exports to that market. And the retaliation or the reciprocal tariffs might not be on the same sector, right? It might not be like for like. So you've had the president specifically call out pharmaceuticals, of which OTCs are in that chapter of the harmonized tariff schedule. There's a few dietary ingredients in there. A lot of those are scattered in other chapters, be it the chemical chapters or the food chapters. And usually, as those of you who follow this area might know, in the harmonized tariff schedule, there's chapters, can't remember how many, I think it's 30 some, but then within each chapter there are lines, there are codes, and the tariff could apply differently to a different code line within a chapter. So one to keep your eye on. Big report due April 1. The pause on Mexico and Canada is up early March. So we will no doubt be seeing things in the papers the end of this week and next week on that. But keep your eye on April 1, when a number of reports are due from USTR, Commerce, Treasury, others to the president on what to do about reciprocal tariffs. Another executive order of note to keep your eye on, DEI rollback. There were a number of executive orders on this. One in particular directs federal agencies to identify up to 9 potential compliance investigations of major private sector institutions for, I don't know what this means, illegal DEI. So part of that's going to be in the eye of the beholder. A lot of law firms are having webinars on this last couple of weeks, and next week CHBA is having one on March 6th. So if you're interested in this one, and happen to be a CHBA member, encourage you to sign up. Another executive order mandating for government agencies, for every 1 new hire, there should be 4 people retiring or otherwise leaving, going out the door. Will this apply to user fee funded programs? Don't know. Something we will have to sort out as we move ahead. We are going to be writing to FDA and others urging that user fee positions be exempt from that, since those are separately funded, and it's kind of silly to not use that money for its intended purpose. Another one, this is where the typo is, sorry, there should be a bullet before the Loper-Bright interpretations of statutes. That's not the executive order's real name, but in essence, what some of you will recall last summer, the Supreme Court issued a landmark opinion overturning what was known as the Chevron doctrine. This is the doctrine that gives agencies discretion as long as their reading of an otherwise ambiguous statute is not arbitrary and capricious. Then a court should go along with the agency's interpretation, since they're the expert in their statute. Instead, Loper-Bright says, no, we can read. We can give you the deference that we think you're worth. So this executive order suggests that agencies go back and look at any policy pronouncements they've made or regs to see, are you sure those are on strong ground? And if they're not, you might or amending them. So definitely one to keep our eyes on in the FDA space as well. Next slide. Quickly on states, next slide. One of the things over the last several years, as Washington has gotten slower moving, a little more dysfunctional, states are more active. A lot of states have trifectas, i.e. their upper house, their lower house, and the governor are all the same party. That means they move faster and more aggressively. Lots and lots of bills on producer responsibility, requiring manufacturers to pay for recycling or disposal of products or their packaging. A lot of bills every year, especially including this year. Chemical restrictions. A lot on PFAS, but also PVC in packaging, trace ingredients in feminine hygiene products. Put a few illustrations there of bills that are live now on that subject. Color additives, not just banned to the coast. Sometimes we think of, the more liberal states, the bluer states, as the ones that are more activist. Not always. Sometimes it can be red states. Oklahoma, for instance, or Missouri. States don't get much more conservative and redder than Oklahoma. They have a color ban bill on 10 or more FDA approved color additives. So not just red number 3, 9 others. So definitely one to watch. It's out of its first committee, it's moving. So we're trying to amend it or work with others to have the bill not pass. Dietary supplements, those of you who are in the supplements for weight management or weight loss space or bodybuilding space know about a lot of these bills, lots and lots of attention there. So many markets, Texas, New Hampshire, several others with weight loss bills and wanting age restrictions and a few other provisions in those bills. So that's just a quick lightning round of the states. I think that was my last slide. Indeed, it was. Thank you, guys.
Excellent. Thank you very, very much for that rundown. What's next? Indeed. So first, a big thank you from us here at Eurofins, Dr. Monagas and David, for your fantastic presentations and for being willing to answer follow-up questions from our audience today. To get to those, as moderator, I'm going to take advantage of the situation and ask a question. So the first one's going to be for David. I spend my days supporting our clients who need to test active pharmaceutical ingredients and excipients per the requirements in the Code of Federal Regulations of 210-211 for drugs and OTCs. So my question for you is, how do you anticipate the current or future changes in administration affecting regulatory frameworks and enforcement actions in the OTCs and dietary supplement sector?
Yeah, for 210-211, I don't foresee much change there. This is my crystal ball. I could be wrong, but I don't foresee a lot of change there. I think enforcement, what's going to be interesting to watch is how widespread layoffs are, whether or not the field is part of that 1 new for 4 out, and attrition. I think you could see, a smaller field operation, which then would arguably slow enforcement. And that might be a good thing. You might think FDA is too aggressive. I happen to be of the philosophy that the American public wants to know there's a cop on the beat. And that cop is, for FDA, the field. So I hope cuts aren't too deep in the field, but I would be watching whether or not the field is significantly impacted by cuts in the number of FDA personnel.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. And I did also have one for Maria, and then I see that questions are starting to come in, so that is great. For Maria, what is USP's perspective on consumer demands for advancements in delivery systems? For instance, the change from capsules and tablets to what seems to be a bigger emphasis on gummies and chews. And what are some of the impacts that those changes may have on method development and validation?
Thank you. Thank you for your question. And related to chewable gels, USP has been developing monograph over the year, especially for multivitamins, right? It has been also a topic for our stakeholder forums, at least in 2 different years, where stakeholders want to learn more about how to propose standards, but also learning about all the challenges in the manufacturing. For example, very important is in chewable gels, the stability and the overages uses, and how we set those limits for overages in our monographs. For example, folic acid has been considered very unstable, and so it's not considered in the multivitamins for chewable gels because of that. So some vitamins, like for example the prenatal, we don't recommend them to be in the form of chewable gels. And from the analytical methodology perspective, of course, sample preparation recovery, everybody understands is very challenging. But little by little, I think we have been able to validate the most important, formulations for chewable gels to make sure they are accurate and precise, right? We're working in more, so be at the look for in the Pharmacopeia Forum for new chewable gel monographs coming soon.
Excellent, thank you. One of the questions from our audience for Dr. Monagas, why the shift from a simpler ID like HPTLC to more expensive ID like QNMR or GC?
So what our subcommittee for modern analytical method does is evaluate on a case-by-case basis, right, the ingredients and the technology. For example, when we have that complexity of, polymers that are very difficult to characterize, right, as the polysaccharides, there was no other analytical technology that allow us to really accurately quantify the asamanans in aloe vera. So that was a good rationale for proposing QNMR for that. But always we're going to be doing it on a case-by-case basis. Those proposals will be open for public comments too. So we want to hear from manufacturers about how they feel about it. We also work with stakeholders at the same time. So USP is working with some of these manufacturers that are actually trying to implement this technique. So there's precedent already in the industry about the use of the analytical technique. So there's a pace for that. There will be implementation periods for that, etc. And also there's in the case of NMR, they're becoming instrument more cheaper. The benchtop, NMRs are becoming more and more cheaper. So we take account for that too.
Great, thank you. David, have there been any notable trends in litigation related to safety or quality concerns within the OTC or supplement industries that companies should be aware of when developing new products?
I don't follow the litigation world closely. I do know there's been a lot of activity around class action certification, around false claims cases, and definitely one to keep your eye on making sure you have claim support. A lot of activity around use of the word natural and what is or isn't natural. I was in the store yesterday and there was a vodka that was marked as natural, and I thought that was an odd one. I'm sure it is natural, but it was vodka. Just struck me as a weird one. Flavored vodka at that. So anyway, I would be watching litigation around that, making sure if you're using natural that it means what you think it means. Those would be a couple.
Excellent, thank you. We've had a couple of allergen questions come in. So this one says, I understand that allergen testing regulations will be changing in 2026. Do we have any expectations for USP to develop compendial methods for allergens?
This has been the look for a few years in the USP, but actually in the food ingredient expert committees. So it has been part of their agenda. Maybe it will work more on that on the new coming cycle. But we are focusing a lot on adulteration, on contaminations, and maybe allergens will be part of this agenda for us.
Great. I believe this one might be for you as well. It says, what's the agency's take on the flow cytometry method as an alternate to the plate method in the enumeration of probiotics?
I think, yeah, we have been evaluating that very closely with the probiotic expert panels and experts also from the what we call a statistics expert committee. We have been even evaluating quality by design protocols for evaluating enumeration tests. So we're working diligent on that, right? And the equivalency of methods. So we have received submission proposal. It has the topic of largely been discussed. So I think in the future we'll be able to actually incorporate those type of tests, depending on the need, depending on the strain, etc., under a good justification and rational.
Great. So I want to thank you again